what can one say? You know, it's funny, just to start a thought exercise. For decades, there's been an arid debate about whether there's, the United States as the one in charge pushing an agenda against Israel, or whether Israel is driving an agenda against the United States. Decades, people have said, who's the tail, who's the dog, and so on. In this particular campaign of violence against the Palestinians, it has become pretty clear that it's irrelevant. That question is completely irrelevant. The United States and Israel are one. Israel has pledged to do whatever the United States wants, and the United States has pledged to do whatever Israel wants. Israel has continued to hammer the Palestinians in Gaza, and regardless of what the leadership in Washington says, they've continued to arm the Israelis, in fact, rather deviously. So, there's a threshold, there's a dollar threshold. When the US government, the executive, puts so many dollars worth of weapons in a container to send to a foreign country, they have to make a declaration. In fact, go to Congress and so on. There's a threshold that they have. The Biden administration, right through this conflict, has mostly sent weapons under the threshold, just so that there's no public declaration. It's the deviousness of the elites. They understand that within the United States as well, there is a considerable anger at the supplying of weapons to Israel, so they've been trying to do it under the radar. So when I say United States and Israel are one, what I also mean is the elites are one. I was just looking at the results in several of the US states. It looks like tens of thousands of people in states like California, Florida, Michigan, and so on have not voted for the Democrats or the Republicans, but have voted for the Green Party's Jill Stein, have voted for Claudia de la Cruz of the Party of Socialism and Liberation, and so on. In Florida, Claudia has got over 12,000 votes already. Now, these are not enough to have made a difference to the Democrats. They are well below the amounts that might have helped Kamala Harris defeat Trump. So nobody can say, well, she lost the election because Jill Stein was in the race, or she lost the election because Claudia de la Cruz or Cornel West were in the race. But no doubt, these left candidates have attracted tens of thousands of people. By the end, it'll be 100,000 plus people across the United States, maybe more, that voted for left candidates who are against the genocide in Gaza. And that's the reason why the US government has been devious in its arms sales. Most likely, when Trump comes in, knowing his personality, he won't care. And given the fact that his party will control both houses of the US Congress, they'll just sell huge amounts of bombs to Israel and smile about it. That's the only difference, that the Democrats had been devious because they know that parts of their base had been very much against the genocide, or turned against the genocide one way or the other. Interesting thought. The United States and Israel won. But not only the US and Israel. Germany supplied 20% of Israel's weapons during this genocidal war. France, the Netherlands, NATO, Britain all gave complete diplomatic support. The British, in fact, provided weapons as well, because the British have one of the largest weapons companies in the world, BAE Systems. They also sold weapons, but not very large amounts. It was the United States and Germany that sold the largest amounts. Interestingly, Germany has had the most stringent attack on anybody trying to stand up on behalf of the Palestinians. At the same time as the German government has been sending large amounts of weapons and weapons systems to Israel during this genocide. So one of the interesting features of these countries, which in some ways I'm going to argue would have to include Australia and New Zealand. I want to come to an understanding of this thing, which includes the United States, these European countries, Israel, and of course Australia and New Zealand. This thing that, we in our institute have started, we've adopted a mainstream term which we're starting to analyze called Global North. Now, before I get there, when Russian troops entered Ukraine, when they entered Ukraine, there was a real frustration among the NATO countries because they found that so many countries in the developing world were insufficiently critical of Russia or refusing to criticize Russia. Months after February 2022, the Prime Minister of Namibia was at the Munich Security Conference. She was sitting on the stage with the Vice President of Colombia, an Afro-Colombian woman, Francia Marquez, and there was a German, well, needless to say, a white man in the chair of that session, 2 black women and a white man. And he began to hector the Prime Minister of Namibia, saying, why doesn't your country condemn Russia? And the Prime Minister of Namibia made some very interesting remarks. Firstly, she said, this is not our war. This is your war. It's a European war. We have lots of problems in Africa. You people don't seem interested. This is your problem, not ours. Why should we condemn it? Secondly, she said that, when we were fighting for our national independence against German-backed rule, in fact, she didn't say that, against colonialism, you backed our enemy and the Soviet Union backed us and gave us arms. So we have some feeling for the Russian people and so on. She made her argument. He started getting very aggressive towards her and she just dismissed him by saying it's your problem. Few months later, when the South Africans first approached the International Court of Justice and started talking about a genocidal situation in Gaza and asking the United Nations to define what was happening in Gaza as a genocide. See, when you go to the International Court of Justice, it's an interstate claim. So one state, South Africa, takes another state, Israel, to the court to adjudicate whether a UN treaty has been violated. And the treaty that they went there to adjudicate was the Convention Against Genocide 1951. That's basically what the ICJ case was. The ICJ case is for the judges of this body to define the nature of the conflict and then make recommendations based on that definition. They went there saying it's genocide. Number of countries backed South Africa. They just all happen to have been developing countries, Bolivia, Nicaragua, and so on. Well, unsuspectingly, I didn't expect it. The rather pathetic government of Olaf Scholz of Germany, he's the Chancellor of Germany, most unlikely that you'd know his name. There was a time when I was younger when we knew the names of people in the West, the rulers, the presidents and prime ministers. You'd go to a young school child for colonial reasons or whatever. We would know who was the Chancellor of Germany, Willy Brandt. A person of some culture and learning and of some intelligence or whatever. These days, it's really hard to know what to make of these people. It's a little like your Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. Is made of chalk. These people are not real. They are sort of the shadows. They're like the drawings made when somebody has died on the floor, made of chalk. Stick man. sort of put up there for the hell of it, you know. So Olaf Scholz of Germany, who really is a non-existent, you know, man of no culture. And by culture, I don't mean anything elitist. It's just that, you know, when you hear him talk, you just don't understand what he's saying. And I'm talking about the subtitles because I don't read German. Maybe he's better in German. But in the subtitles, it's gibberish. Maybe I'm using bad subtitles, but that's what the German media gives us. And he just sounds chaotic in his opinions. So Olaf Scholz, Germany, approached the ICJ and said, this is not genocide. We would like to put in a petition that contests the view of the South African government. Well, that was interesting. The German government goes to the International Court of Justice to say that we know that this is not a genocide. Okay.